Hello everybody and welcome to my video on how to assemble the 5119 cameras. This is the Model 810. When you receive your 5119 cameras kit, you're going to receive this camera itself. In the 8x10 kit, you will also, if you back the Kickstarter at least, receive 6 of these wood offcuts, well, bamboo offcuts. These are going to be used with clamps. If you don't have clamps, I do recommend getting some before you assemble this. They don't have to be anything fancy, but they do need to have at least a 12-inch clear space inside of them. Some of the 8x10s have had issues with wood warp. The Kickstarter lot had the fewest issues of the last few generations of these, but there were still some, so some clamps might be a good idea. You're also going to get a bottle of Tight Bond 3. If you back the Kickstarter for multiple cameras, you're going to just get a slightly larger bottle than this instead of one per camera. And you will also get one of these disposable brushes per camera. So just so for a note, I'm going to be using this reusable brush instead of the disposable brushes for assembly. And then the last thing you're going to get is a little 35mm cassette Tupperware holder plastic thing that's got some nuts and bolts in it. So these are for holding the shutter assembly together. We will get to these in just a bit. Okay, so let's open up the camera. And if you do that well enough, you could probably even reuse that sticker somewhere because it really didn't stick to the paper very well at all. All right, let's do a quick inventory. Here's the data sheet. Now, one quick thing to notice, you might see mine is a little bit shinier than what you're going to get. I have 3 layers of clear oil-based polyurethane matte or satin finish, I forget, already applied to these. So that's why mine's a little bit darker and shinier than yours. This is the data plate. Here we have one of the side felts. We'll set the felt over here to this side. This is the side bubble level plate. Another piece of side felt. This is the actual pinhole, the front of the camera. And yours will almost certainly have paper on one side of it. You just need to take that paper off of the side that has it on it. This is the backing felt for the front of the camera. This is a slight difference with yours. This will actually be like that. Okay. This is the top part of the camera that has the bubble level on it. This is the bottom part of the camera that has the tripod socket. So, this is the top and bottom felt pieces right here. These are your shock cord straps you'll be using. Yours will actually be black. I misordered the color when I picked them up for the final test units. But these will actually be black for you. We'll see how to assemble those later in the video. This is the shutter assembly. It's 3 parts. The lollipop, the half moon, and then the actual shutter holder. If you look at the shutter assembly right here, you'll see there's a part of it that is smooth where the metal ring is, and then a part that has a ridge between the wood and the ring. The part with the ridge, or the valley, between the wood and the ring, this is the back. So the front should be a little bit more smooth up here. These are your felt liners. There's 8 pieces here. 4 of them are a very thin ultra suede, the same as this material right here. And these are for lining the inside of this part. And then these 4 pieces here are wool. They're thicker. They're a black 3mm thick wool gasket. These line the outside of this part. You can see there are some engravings marked into the 8x10 here. Those, when we assemble this, will line up like that with the wool. So that's a guide to help you make sure that you place the wool correctly. And then this is the exposure calculator that's the back of the camera. All right, so let's start with the easiest part here, and let's get us set up to be successful. All right, the easiest part to assemble is this back panel. That's what this is called. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab some of our tight bond, and you don't need very much of this at all for these assemblies. In fact, if you put too much tight bond on, you can introduce warp to your camera that you don't want to have. So we're going to start here with these little notches, okay? And however you want to arrange these, the important part is that the notches are facing upward right now. Now, one thing is you put the glue on the camera here. Draw an imaginary line between these notches. Don't put any glue there, okay? Because that space inside of these notches is going to stay empty. So I'm going to brush this out just a little bit, and like I said, we really don't need much at all. Find the thick piece of wool that's shaped like a trapezoid, I think that is. We're just going to put it up here. The way that we want this to go in is that we're going to have these 45-degree angles like this. I am not fully happy with the glue job here. That's going to be better. And over here as well. If you have any place where you're going to run into problems with these peeling up, it's going to be the corners. All right, there we go. Next, I'm going to put a little bit more glue here just to be on the safe side. Oh, that's way too much. But what we can do here is run this the whole length. Now what we also want to do is put some here in this little triangle. There we go. We're going to grab one of these pieces with the notches. They're the same, so it really does not matter which side they go on. I'm going to slide it here. And what you want to do is make sure that the notches in this wool gasket line up with the etchings in the wood, or the bamboo, I should say. There we go. One down, two down. I'm going to rotate this just to make it a hair easier on myself. Next, we're going to grab this thin trapezoidal piece. We're going to put it right here, like that. Now, this is the part that when you load your camera, the film holder is going to rest up against this. So this faces outward to the back of the camera. Next, we're going to finish making this part. Press that wool down well. I'm going to peel up the paper on the back of this. One note, if you do decide to stain, paint, or polyurethane, or finish somehow your cameras, what you want to do is do that before assembly. And this part that we're working on right now does not need or get any sort of finishing material, simply because we're going to completely cover it with felt and suede, and any sort of finishing material could just make the glue not adhere quite as well. And likewise, if you do decide to finish your cameras in some sort of material, don't finish the inside of them for the same reason. All right, so we've turned it over again. Now, if you're doing this correctly so far, there are no etchings up here. So let's grab some. I'm going to show you before I put the glue in what I should have done last time. I'm going to show you how this gets laid out. And like that. Now there is some overlap with these pieces. You can overlap it however you want. It doesn't matter. The aesthetics of this are unimportant because it faces inside of the camera. One thing that's a good idea, of course, always is to spread this out as evenly as possible. And I'm going to now take this and put it felt side down, paper side up. There we go. And the reason I did that is because the felt side that's been exposed has been rubbed and crushed a little bit. If you put this down, you're putting the smoother, flatter side down. When you peel the paper up now, this has texture to it, and it will do a slightly better job of absorbing internal reflections. I'm going to do that with the bottom now. And feel free to avoid getting glue on the joints there, as we will be gluing those up later. One other advantage, by the way, of putting the felt down before you peel the paper is that when you peel the paper off just holding the felt, it can cause it to stretch a little bit, which can make it not fit properly. So if you peel the paper off after the felt is on the wood, you will have, in all probability, a better fit for your parts. All right, next we're going to do the sides one at a time here. I'm going to just overlap the glue onto each end of the felt, top and bottom, because there is that overlap we saw earlier. And if it's not perfect, that's a-okay, because this faces inside of the camera. No one's ever going to see the mistakes you make on this side of the piece. There we go. All right. Back. Okay, there we go. That is the first, oops. The first piece has now been assembled. All right, with the first piece assembled, we're going to set this off to the side and start working on another piece. For this part of the build, it really doesn't matter all that much where you start. I'm just going to start with the bottom piece right here. On the outside, the bottom piece has a tripod socket that is inside of the sighting lines right there. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab one of the top and bottom piece felts. Now there are two felt shapes, well, three felt shapes, but we're going to do these ones first. You can see one of them is longer. These are for the sides. One of them is shorter. This is for this piece. So tip on gluing, don't slather glue all over this whole thing. A couple of reasons. We need to be able to fold this over, and I'll show you why in a minute. Second thing is, if you put tons of glue on here, you will cause the bamboo to warp. So I'm going to show you how I do this. You can go crazy gluing this if you want to, because it's not actually touching the bamboo. Now what we want to do is we're going to turn this over and we're going to line this up. These little notches here are the same width as the front here. So we're going to put those in line with the front, and then we're going to pull this back here until the rear edge runs just in front of these holes on the back. So now you know you've gotten it aligned correctly if you cannot see any of the wood poking out up here, and if these holes are aligned with the rear edge of your felt. Just going to give this a very good press down. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this felt off, because we could wait till later with this, but it does make it a little bit easier in the future if we have already removed it. Now we're going to grab this corner like that, and we're going to fold it over. This is where having some masking tape will really help you. I did not include that with the kits because there's so little that's needed, but trust me when I tell you that grabbing some masking tape will make this part of the construction a future part of the construction a whole lot easier. So we're going to fold these over until they align roughly with the edges of the interior hole here, just like that. And then we're going to do that again with the front, about like this. I'm going to do this actually with a couple pieces of tape. Frog tape, which is what I'm using, works beautifully for this, but masking tape will work very well also. Now this part is ready to go off to the side and finish drying before we put anything else on it. You're going to do the exact same process here for the top piece, and the piece of felt with this aligns in a similar manner, where you can see that this side of the wood is the same width as that piece of felt, and it just gets aligned like that, glued on in the exact same way, folded over and taped in the exact same way. Okay, so here's the next part that we are going to glue up. This is the front of the camera, which has the tripod. You are looking at it right now from the front. If this is what you see, you're holding this the wrong way. This is the side we're going to glue. This is the pinhole. It's placed on the back of the camera, and it is if you put this together backwards, your shutter will not work. You will just kind of ruin the pinhole. So this is an important piece to get correct. Here's the felt or the suede rather, for this part. Up here is a notch. This notch goes along the top. So there is a difference in the shape of this piece. Here you can see there's a corner. Here you can see there's a block. This block is the top. So this notch goes to the top like this. This is how this piece is going to fit in. You can see there's a fourth hole here. This is so that you can sight up the alignment of the felt, and then when you actually glue it in, it'll be just fine. That little hole leading to the wood is not going to affect your images one bit. This part of the process does not need any folding over. This piece of felt, it's cut specifically to size on purpose. So we're just going to do a really minimal glue up here, get it holding into the corners, a little bit along the top and bottom. But this does not need much glue because the internal structure of the felt, which we'll see as we continue to put this camera together, is going to hold this piece in place as well as what the glue is doing. We're going to look here and make sure that these holes are lined up correctly. This feels pretty good. And we're not going to peel up the felt just yet. We're just going to leave this. All right, here's the next piece. The two sides are done exactly the same way. This is the side with the bubble level on it. And this is the side with the data and the tripod socket. So again, as with the bottom, if you put a bunch of glue on this felt, you're going to be just fine. It will not affect the wood at all, so that would be a good technique to do. The way that I do the sides is I'll make a little triangle of glue like this, and then I'll bring the glue out pretty darn close to these holes, and then just kinda this. I know this does not seem like all that much glue, and it's not, and it doesn't need to be. Now, to place these, what we're gonna do, you can see that the, oops, here we go, that's right. This felt outcropping here lines up from this notch to the base. So you know you have this correct if the rear of the felt lines up with these 5 holes, exactly like was on the top, and that's not quite right. We'll slide this down. This piece of the felt here should align with the base, with that base part right there, with that edge. So that feels pretty good. Going to get this nice and smooth down. And again, you saw I used almost no glue on this because that will help prevent the bamboo from warping. go. You can see all of the ultra suede felt that gets taken up by this paper. One thing when you use this for the first time, or you might want to really blow it out well with some compressed air, or take some clear packaging tape over the felt before you finish assembling this, and pull up any remaining felt residue. Oops. Because there will be some, and felt residue can get onto your negatives for the first. I usually had issues in the first 6 to 10 images with a little bit of felt residue getting on the negatives. So just be aware of that. Once the felt settles, it's not really such an issue. All right, now as we did with the bottom pieces, we're going to fold this side over like that. We're going to fold this side over. Next, we're going to do that again with the front. Like I said, this is optional, but trust me, it really does make your life a lot easier in about 10 minutes. Next, we're going to do this exact same thing with the other side of the camera. Okay, so we're making some good progress here. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to return to the front of the camera. We gave the glue a little bit of time to set up here. In my filming time, it was about 8 minutes. So that will help ensure that the felt stays in place. The shutter includes these 3 parts and these 6 parts. I'm going to set these off to the side here. And now you can see here there are 3 holes. This half moon goes on this side. The lollipop goes on this side. And then the assembly fits over it like this, the part with the filter ring. I'm just going to take, these are M5 25 millimeter screw bolts. So if for any reason you ever need to replace these, they're metric 5 standard thread, 25 millimeters long. Just going to line them up there, make it look like I know what I'm doing. Lift up the tripod, the front of the camera. This part right here, I hand bent all of these, so if you feel like you want to make it more or less, you're welcome to. I just grabbed a pair of pliers, wrapped it with frog tape so I wouldn't scratch them, and then just bent them to an angle that would allow me to put everything in a package easily. Next, we're going to flip this over. Now, you might be wondering if we're going to be using lock nuts or washers, and the answer is no, because the felt is going to do all of that for us. When we get the washers nice and compressed in here, the felt works like a lock nut and a washer. And that means that you can adjust the tension on your shutter simply by accessing the nuts at the front of the camera. That is a really nice property of the felt. So we're just going to hand thread these on. And next, I'm holding the nut here on the back as I hand thread this bolt. Okay, I'm going to do the same. And the same. Okay. Oh, that is a hair on the rough side, I'd say. A little bit more resistance than I like. Just going to walk this bolt out slightly. That's good. Now, that's exactly how I like it. I like it to be, it's going to take a little bit of working in because of the finish here from the polyurethane, but I'd like this to be a smooth motion that will not flip down by itself. Okay, it's a matter of personal preference on that. Now, as you break in your shutter, you're going to have to continually adjust these nuts just a little bit, and that's a completely normal and good part of the process. Okay, front plate's done. Let's get to doing some actual assembly. So one of the reasons we put this piece together first is we wanted to give it the most time for the glue to set. As you can see, the glue here has set. This has only been about 10 or 12 minutes in filming time, and that glue is really well set. This side of the camera faces outward. Now, one tip I can give you when you assemble these is you want to grab an 8x10 holder, and you'll want to kind of use that as you assemble it. Now, the reason that this notch is here as it is because this ridge is part of your light proofing system for your film holder. So when you load your film, this ridge nests right into the notch in the camera, and right now you would be looking at this camera as though you were standing behind it with the rest of the camera, right? So that is why this exists in that way. We'll be using the film holder in a bit. Actually, with this camera, it might not be as big of an issue. Anyway, next thing we're going to do is we're going to start grabbing the pieces. So you can see kind of how they're going to start coming together. Okay, now we need glue. Doesn't matter which side you start with, just pick one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some glue on each of these joints here, and where the bottom of the wood is going to connect to the bottom of the base. You want to make sure when you assemble it like this that the suede side with the overlapping pieces is facing you, because that is the inside of the camera. All right, one side down. Set that there. We're going to do the same up here at the top. Okay. Top and bottom are done. Next, let's take care of this side. This is where things start to get a little bit hard. Oops, 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 oops. Pretend I didn't do that. You're also going to put some glue on the fingers for the top and bottom, on the joint portions of the top and bottom. All right. So the way to do this is to line up the holes on the side and start working them through like that. And then we're going to line up the joints on the top and bottom. These pieces have a little bit of warping in them, and I'll show you how to take that out of these with clamps in just a minute. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same process for the other side. Now here's the part where it's a good idea to have an 8x10 film back handy, because you want to make sure that it's going to be able to fit in here comfortably, just like that. And if it does, then you know you're going to be able to slide it in and out of your camera easily. So it's easier to verify that before you finish assembling your camera. Okay, now if you have clamps, this is a good time to grab them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a couple of these and Not perfectly happy with that. Let's try this again. I forgot to leave the film holder in the camera. This is an important part of the clamp up, by the way, because if you put the film holder in the camera and leave it there, then you can't over clamp the camera and prevent the film holder from fitting in. So we have this fitted up this way. This is a really challenging part if you're going to use clamps because you don't want it so tight that you can't remove the 8x10 holder, which is exactly what I've done. So got to loosen it up a little bit here and here. Still lining up. There we go. So, there we go. Okay. So this will come in and out a little bit more easily once it's actually finished. But what we're going to do now is we're going to set this off to the side to dry for about 15-20 minutes, just long enough to hold in place. Now, if you don't have clamps, I am going to include some number of rubber bands that you can use instead, and those will hold it together, and the inside of the camera's structure will keep it light tight. If you're going to use the rubber bands, you do still want to put these 6 panels that I give you on the sides here, so that when you really stretch those rubber bands over, these panels help disperse the pressure along the seams to help keep it flat. Keep them flat. And for that, what you would do is you'd put one here, same on these sides, and then one on the top and one on the bottom when you rubber band everything together. All right, one thing before you clamp it up, what you want to do is you want to get the front of the camera installed. We're not going to glue this in just yet. We're just going to get it installed. There we go. Okay, now that we've got the camera's back parts glued, what we're going to do is we're going to glue up the front. And you can see I have it resting here just to make sure that none of the parts in the back caused it to bind. So I'm going to pull this out. There we go. And we're just going to run some glue along this bead. Oops, did not mean to put it there. And put it into the notches, some of the notches. Don't have to do many. And right along the inside. And as with all of this, you don't need that much glue. Yeah. Now let's get this guy put back in here. Okay. It's like I didn't accidentally drip glue where it wasn't supposed to be now. Okay, now we're going to clamp this guy to dry. If you don't have clamps, I did provide just a bunch of rubber bands that you can put around the outside to hold this tight, and that will do a really good job of getting everything setting up nicely. There are some holes in back, and what you want to do is make sure that they are fully clear and not partially clear when you do your glue up. Okay, now let's do a quick check on the quality of our clamp up. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our 8x10 film holder, we're going to slide it in. It's a little bit rougher than I generally like it, but this will expand out a little bit when the clamps come off. But we can get it in and out, that's good. And we're actually going to leave it in to try and help make sure that the wood does not set up in such a way that it is too narrow for the 8x10 film holders to fit in. I grabbed my biggest 8x10 film holder. There are variations in size with these, so you want to grab your biggest one. Okay, flip this back over. Do my best not to drop the film holder out of the back. Next, we're going to do the top and bottom. There we go. Everything is clamped up. This is going to need to glue. The glue is going to need to dry here for a little bit. You do want to just put little bits of super glue in some of these areas along the seams. You can also do that after the wood glue dries, and that will help make sure that your camera can really withstand falls like off the side of a mountain. Been there. So while this glue dries, we can actually do the next step. Want to make sure that's free floating. That's still good. I'm happy with that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to finish assembling the back. All right, so it might be tempting at this point to tie up the shock cord on the back here, but it's not quite time to do that yet. There's one other thing we need to do inside the camera first. So while the clamps are on, or your rubber bands, this is a perfect time to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this glue, I'm going to put a bunch of it on my brush. I'm going to go right up here in the corners, and I'm just going to put glue into the corners, just like that. And it's okay here to use a decent amount of glue, because we're clamping or rubber banding this, we're less likely to have issues with warping. The warping happens when the glue is drying on its own before the wood is clamped up. That's why we are very judicious on using a little bit of glue with the Suede assembly earlier. Okay. Lots and lots of glue is applied now. There's another thing we can do. I'm going to put some more glue on our brush here, and we're just going to go along the front seams as well. All right, this is where the magic of the tape comes in. Just going to start on the top and the bottom. Just going to take the tape off, and we're just going to press that felt down into place. And again. We're going to work the base felt underneath the side felt, and that glue that we just put in is going to help the felt from the base adhere to the corners very nicely. Now we're going to do the same with the top. There we go, just like that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to repeat this so that we can glue up the side felt. And because this is being attached to the felt and not to the wood, you can feel free to be a little bit heavy-handed with the glue that you use. Use that. There we go. Now, doing that will help ensure that there are no light leaks inside of your camera, because what you've done is you've now glued up all of the seams. You've also overlapped felt, 2 layers of suede along the key seams here, and then you have a single layer of suede up along the front. But this front seam here is the least likely to cause light leak issues. There is one other thing you want to check for. Make sure that when you've put these together, that you don't have a little gap here like I do. This honestly will not really cause an issue with your images, But if you are concerned about it, what you could do is just run a little bit of black thread through there, a few layers of black thread, or just flow in some black paint or something like that, and that would help with that little gap right there if you feel inclined. Let's get our film holder back in. And we're going to let this rest for about 20 more minutes to let the clamps do their job. At that point, we should be safe to take off the clamps, put on the shock cord, and have a completed camera. All right, to assemble the back, we've got the back panel here. We're going to take the paper off of it first. It is a lot easier to get the paper off of the back of this right now before we assemble the camera than it is after the camera's been assembled. Okay, this exposure calculator nests right like that. These are 3 pieces of shock cord. Now they are tied in a knot when you receive them to make it a little bit easier for you. What these do is these hold this in place. So these are going to thread right through the holes in the wings that protrude from the side of the camera. There we go. And then they feed right up through the back of the camera like that. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to pull this over to the side. We're going to feed it through this hole and down through the side of the camera. There we go. Now we're going to hold this, we're going to hold some slack on the end of this because we want to adjust the pressure of the back. If you just tie it right here, this isn't going to have enough pressure to hold the film back in and keep it light proof up at the top. So you do want to have this be a little bit tight. So these are longer than you necessarily need them to be. If this part ever breaks, it's a 3mm, which is also a 1/8 of an inch in the US standard shock cord. So you can replace it pretty easily. That's a little tight. And then we repeat with the other 2 when we don't have clamping boards in the way blocking our fingers, but that's how you install the shock cord. And then the 3 pieces of shock cord provide even pressure on the film holder to keep it pressed up against that wool gasket so everything is light proof. And the shape of the camera down here means that the only entryway for light is along the top. But if we look at the top, that wood edge right there goes right up to the film holder, and then the film holder rests inside of that wool gasket. That provides a very, very reliable trap to prevent your camera from being fogged, or your film from being fogged by exterior light. There we go. Once you get these last 2 pieces of shock cord in, your camera is assembled. Thank you for watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track producing content which is useful and helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about checking these every couple of days and answering questions. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future videos, and if I have the technical know-how and equipment, I'm more than happy to make those. One last thing. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Got to get up, Steinbeck. I have to turn off the camera.